Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I'd like to speak to you about the development of supply base. Alexander was talking about finding sub-tier suppliers, third-tier suppliers, and the difficulty of finding some of the suppliers in Russia. So in terms of development of suppliers, one of the most critical functions is the level of quality that the supply base has. So let me give you just the benchmark information. TS 16949 is the quality management standard that all the American OEMs, every German OEM, Mercedes, Volkswagen, all those companies, the French OEMs, the Italians, all subscribe to TS 16949 as their quality management standard. And there are about 48,500 companies that are certified to TS 16949 presently. Less than 1% of that certification comes out of Russia. Just to give you a benchmark, China has over 20% of that certification market. So when you talk about development of suppliers, one of the most critical components that's missing in Russia is the level of quality that is involved, that exists in Russia at this time. So when you talk about quality, one of the things that you always have to keep in mind is everybody has somewhat different definitions of quality. Now, fundamentally, if you don't have quality as part of what you produce, I give an equation. It's similar to having a football team that doesn't know how to pass a ball. It's fundamental. If you cannot do that, you can't do anything else from there on, right? So the most important component of that quality is really to understand what is it that you have to do in order to develop that base of suppliers that understand that quality. So let me just give you some cultural perspective or cultural definitions about quality that different cultures have utilized. So when you speak to German car companies or when you speak to Germans in general, they speak about quality in terms of durability. So how long a product lasts. Mercedes has a commercial where they show a car that has gone 1.6 million miles, and that's what they advertise. And so durability is core to how a German thinks about what a definition of quality is. If you speak to somebody from France and you talk about quality, their definition is more likely to be about elegance, about how something feels, how something smells. And so they produce very elegant products. And that's their definition of quality. It's not so important that it lasts 10 years. It is more important how it feels and how elegant that product is. Now, if you talk to someone from Japan, and we all agree Japanese quality is excellent, but if you speak to somebody in Japan, the definition of quality is not a durability or elegance, but it's about a process. It's about a process of perfection. So they talk about it as a continual process of improving something, and that's how they define quality. Now, if you talk to somebody from Korea, and you speak about quality, they will tell you, they will describe it in a sense about pridesmanship, about you being proud to carry one of their products. Or Hyundai says they want you to be proud to drive a Hyundai. Samsung talks about how they want you to be proud to carry one of their cell phones. So it is really in description to how the customer feels about the product that they carry. Now, the largest market that is making the transition in China is obviously the one that is most under flux right at this point. But if you speak to somebody from China, it is all about transactional. And what that means is that their definition of quality changes depending on what is the transaction that they're making. So I will assure you that if you look at the majority of the computers or cell phones, they tend to be made in China. And you look at the quality of those products, and it's phenomenal. And yet, if you look at some of the toys that they make, it is absolutely at the bottom of the durability or elegance or perfection in that level. And it is because the description is more on a transactional level. So those are really kind of some of the, and if you can go down to every specific, Italians have a different definition of quality and all that. So different cultures all look at it from a different perspective. What I would challenge you guys to do is to have the conversation to say, what defines Russian quality? Because one of the biggest mistakes that countries and companies have made is they try to copy what other people are doing. And I will guarantee you that you will not be able to compete with the Germans on durability, because they have many, many years of head start in that process. You will not be able to compete with the Japanese on perfection. They have developed tools and techniques, and they ingrain that process on kids that go to school. If you go to a Japanese school and you watch how they teach kids to work in teams, they teach kids to think in process of improvement every day. And so you cannot compete with cultures that have these things ingrained. But I will guarantee you that there is a definition, or there is a culture perspective of Russian quality that you can grow and develop, and that will make it the unique selling proposition that will define your quality in Russia. And that's how you develop more research centers, that's how you develop your training and education, because ultimately, what are you training your people to do? You have to have an objective that you're training your people to do. And so you have to understand that core essence of what is that quality that you are trying to develop, that you will train your people to be able to do. Now, whether you're measuring durability, whether you're talking about elegance, whether you're talking about perfection, there are certain things that you must do. One of them is you must know how to measure where you are. So measurement systems, statistical processes, process of development, those are fundamental to any definition that you have. And there are a lot of techniques and processes that are well known throughout the world that you can train your people to do. But ultimately, until you define what is your definition of quality, you cannot make the kind of improvements that you see countries make. And so when I look at that statistics of that 1%, I say there is a huge opportunity in Russia. there is a huge opportunity to grow your supply base. And ultimately, car companies do not want to ship parts from far places to assemble here and to sell to this market. They want to be able to produce the parts here, sell the cars here. And Russia probably could service most of Eastern Europe in that process if it developed the supply base. But it isn't really enough to have the Visteons in the market. It really needs to be the suppliers who supply to Visteon that need to be developed. It's that sub-tier that really fundamentally needs the help in development. And those guys really need to understand what is the quality objective that you're trying to achieve. So, that challenge to you guys to have that conversation about what defines Russian quality. It's really a process of development. If you look at countries that have made that migration, Japan took between 35 to 40 years to understand their definition of quality. In the United States, when Japanese cars first started coming in, they were considered crap. Made in Japan meant that it was really bad quality. And it took 35 to 40 years for them to change that perception of that quality. If you look at countries like Korea, they made that migration between 30 to 25 years. They cut about 10 years of the learning curve of the Japanese because they observed the Japanese and they learned what they could reduce in that waste. And so when you look at Hyundai that came into the US market in the 1980s, at the same time that Yugos came into the US, and you look at that quality improvement of where Hyundai automobiles are today, in that 25 years, they've made a huge leap. Now, we have offices in China, and we travel to China all the time, and I look at the quality there, and I say the Chinese are going to make that transition in 20 to 15 years. Think about that. They're going to make that transition. They're going to shave 10%. When we look at the exhibit today here, there are more Chinese suppliers exhibiting in this hall than all the other countries combined. About 650 Chinese suppliers exhibiting at this show. That's an incredible number. And they're going to make that quality migration in 20 years. So the challenge for Russia is, how are you going to make that in 10 to 15 years? And that's really the conversation that I hope we strike in terms of how to develop that sub-tier. Training is a critical component, but training in itself doesn't do anything. You have to have training for a specific purpose. You have to have objectives of what you're trying to achieve when you do that training. And I say, that's the challenge that you guys have. Thank you.